Okay, so welcome. I'm covering some information for those of you who weren't at the first class where we started delving into logic. And even if for those of you who were there, kind of a refresher on um, getting started on the first thing. Okay, so the first thing is I've opened up logic. Now, um, for those, it should be in your sidebar. Sometimes here I have it on the left side of my screen. Sometimes it's at the bottom, but it's this icon, which is the um, platinum record in a black. Uh, it's meant to represent a platinum record, right? So the silver disc in the black. Now, if you don't, some of you sometimes they reset the computers over the break. So it might not show up there as a default. So if it's not there, we have to find logic. So go to this graphic, the Launchpad. Click on the Launchpad, and if you just type logic, it'll show Logic Pro X. Click on that, it'll load up logic. And then once you have it open, if you right click on it and do Options Keep in Dock, it will always be there for you when you go to use logic. All right. So that's how we load up logic. So when you first open logic, it'll give you the option to have a new project. So let's look at this screen quickly. Okay, so this would be create a new empty project starting from scratch. You also have your recent tracks that you've done, and as we move through the class, you'll see more stuff there. So those are pretty much your two options. Generally, if you're starting a new project, you click on new project. Now, let's look at this little button down here, which gives you details. And if we scroll this down, we're going to talk more about this as we move on. But generally, the music grid is the window that we use for working with MIDI. We're going to talk more about this. Your next option here is tempo. Now, this is basically how fast or slow your song is, right? If we're listening to music and you're clapping along with the song, you know, any kind of vamp you're thinking of in your head, you know, that is the tempo, right? How many clicks we have, and we refer to tempo as BPM, which BPM stands for beats per minute. Okay, so it's how many times I clap within a minute designates um, designates the tempo of the song that we're working on. This is a mathematical equation, right? It's how many claps happen within a minute, which is 60 seconds. So if we set our tempo, and you can drag this little slider here to change it, or you can actually highlight it and enter it with the keyboard. So at 60 beats a minute, that's going to be one quarter note each second, okay? Because there are 60 seconds in a minute. If there's 60 beats in a minute, that happens every second. If similarly, if we did 120 beats a minute, that is 2 beats for every second, right? There's 120 beats in 1 minute, BPM, beats per minute. So, and then you can also take your mouse, hover over the tap tempo, and you think, okay, this is the tempo I want. You click each beat, each quarter note, and Logic will do the computation. So if I'm thinking of this tempo, you know, generally we're at 104, 105 beats a minute. Now, we're going to do um, our first project in class is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and generally for me, I'm a bad piano player, so 80 beats a minute is a good place for me to start. Now, again, we are going to talk through the next couple weeks about MIDI. Everything having to do with MIDI is editable. I use the comparison a lot that working within a DAW, working with MIDI is a lot like writing an essay with a word processor on a computer. You know, if you're capturing sound, capturing audio, that's kind of like typing on a typewriter, right? If you make a mistake, you got to start from the beginning, right? You can't go back and do a spell check and fix all your mistakes. Working within a DAW, working with MIDI, it's all virtual, so you can go back and change stuff at any time until you're ready to finish it. Now, we'll talk more about why this is important later, but basically, you can pick the key center for your song, right? We talked a little bit about a crash course in music theory. For doing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we're dealing with the key of C major, right? So you can designate C major or minor. You can designate a time signature here, whether you want it to be in 3/4 time or 4/4 time. This is all the process of setting up your DAW. Now, here we have sample rate. It's a bit confusing. Really, the only thing you need to know are these first two numbers, 44.1, 48, and 48. Right? This has to do with the sample rate kilohertz. And for our purposes, the only thing we really need to know is that 48K is the sample rate if you're making music for television or film. 44.1 is the sample rate if you're making music for CD or MP3s, right? Commercial music this can be on the radio. That's 44.1. Music on the radio, music on Spotify, music that's consumed by the public in an audio format. That's 44.1. Music that is matched to a picture, a moving picture, either on DVD or digital download or television or film, what have you. That's all at 48K. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it is. Now, the thing we need to understand too, similar to photography, is that when you, if you think about photography, right, you take a picture and if you print it out, that's a higher resolution than if you view it on a screen, right? You can take something that's at a high resolution rate and you can lower it to a lower resolution rate, no problem. Never a problem with that. What you can't do is you can't take a lower resolution rate and make it bigger into a higher resolution, because once you're at the lower resolution, you can't go up. Or if you do go up, you're degrading the product. You're degrading the image. So generally, I like to record at a higher sample rate at 48 in case I'm going to need it for something for film or TV, and then at the end we can bounce it down to 44.1, no problem. Okay, so this is how we go about setting up Logic for the very first time. We choose a project, and then Logic opens up, and we're presented with this screen, right? And so here we have the option to get started with our project, choosing a software instrument, green, audio, and then if you play bass or guitar, you have that option, and then we have our virtual drummer, which we'll talk at the end of the course. But for getting started, we're going to choose software instrument. We're going to hit create. Actually, this should be on empty channel strip. Choose an instrument, plug in empty channel strip, software instrument, hit create, and that's going to create an instrument. And that is the first part of getting started within Logic. So go ahead and do that on your, hopefully you're doing all of this as you're watching this. And we're going to move on to the next part, which is setting up advanced audio mode.